Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Cece with One Green Pea. Today we're talking all about the repot. Why you do it, when you do it, how to pick a pot, plus I'll do a demo with lots of tips and tricks along the way. Watch till the end when I answer 3 common questions about repotting. If that all sounds good, tap on that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and let's get to it. So you bring home a plant. You find the perfect place for it with the right amount of light. You water it regularly, fertilize it when it needs to, and the plant grows and grows and grows. I mean, that's the goal, right? Well, eventually it's going to need a new pot. Repotting your plant is a fairly simple process, and it definitely gets easier with practice. First, let's talk about the basics. There are 3 main reasons why you will need to repot your plant. Number 1, as we just mentioned, the plant will eventually outgrow its pot. Plants grow, that's what they do, and eventually will demand more space. The second is that the soil periodically needs to be replenished. The nutrients in the soil are leached out as you water and eventually need to be replaced. And the third is to prompt your plant to grow bigger. It's actually true. There was a study done in 2012 that showed that putting your plant in a larger pot actually stimulates growth. I'll link to that study down in the caption below. How do you know when to repot? Well, the plant will give you signs if you know what to look for. The first and most obvious sign is that roots are coming out the bottom of the plant. Now that's easy to check on a smaller medium-sized plant, a little bit harder on a larger floor-sized plant. Another sign the plant gives is that roots start showing at the top of the soil. And that happens because so much root growth is happening that it's actually pushing the plant up and out of the pot. Another sign your plant needs repotted is that the soil dries out more quickly than it used to. So if you're just paying attention and noticing, I didn't used to have to water this plant more than once every 10 days and now it's dry every 5 to 7 days, that might be a sign that the roots are overtaking the soil and therefore it's drying out too quickly. A third sign, and especially this is more evident on a large plant, is that plant gets top heavy, that the support the plant is getting from the pot is not enough for the vertical growth. It's important to note that repotting too often can overstress a plant and lead to dropping of leaves, wilting of tips, and generally stunting the growth of the plant. Most plants will need repotted about every 12 to 18 months. The third topic I want to touch on before we start repotting this plant is how to pick a pot. The general rule of thumb is that the new pot should be about 2 inches bigger in diameter than the original pot. It's sometimes difficult to tell because pot sizes aren't standard. So what I like to do is I want my new pot to be both wider and deeper than the original pot. And I'll just take the pot that it's in and make sure that it fits inside of the new pot. You don't want to go too small of a new pot because then you're going to have to repot too soon. And again, that could stress out the plant, but you also don't want too big of a pot. Finding some sort of middle ground is important. What type of pot? I prefer to use a ceramic pot for a plant that I don't want to dry out too quickly. A terracotta or stone pot is great for succulents or Hoya or plants that want to dry out completely between waterings. And to be honest, a grow pot like this is absolutely going to be the easiest thing because you can take the whole pot out for watering, put it in your sink, let the water run through, and it's just a really easy option. I like to do most of my repotting outside because it makes a mess, but that's not always possible. So we'll demo this inside. I have covered my work surface with this handy plant mat. I will link it down below because it's really handy. It's easy to clean up and keeps most of the soil in the water contained. The first thing you're going to do, obviously, is take your plant out of the pot. Now, you want to be careful about doing this because you don't want to yank up on the stems. And so if it's in a grow pot, you could just massage the outside of the pot. I should note that it is really helpful to water your plant a couple of days before you are going to repot. That is going to make the roots happy and less likely to go into shock, and it will help to keep the root ball more intact. I'm kind of massaging this a little bit so the soil pulls away from the sides of the pot. Then I like to turn it on its side and very gently pull on the stems. Now this is coming out rather easily. If it didn't, I love this meat fork and I use it to release plants from the sides of the pot. So I just press it in along the sides because sometimes when the roots are really root bound, they cling to the sides of the pot, especially if it's a natural stone surface where it's a little bit rough. This one is coming out okay though. So the next step that you're going to want to do is check the roots. And this one isn't terrifically root bound, but there were roots coming out the bottom. So I knew it was ready for a repot. The roots look nice and healthy. They are pretty white. If your roots are black and mushy, that means you've got some root rot going on and you're going to want to trim those away. I like to loosen my root ball a little bit just by massaging it. There is a lot of root mass here, so I'm not too concerned about damaging any smaller, delicate root. As the roots are tightly bound inside of a pot, then they start growing around each other, and you want to sort of disturb that pattern. So again, they'll reach out into the new pot. So that's really all I'm going to do there. You can see the roots are now freed up just a little bit, but it's still got a lot of its soil intact. I have chosen this pot, which is just a little bit bigger than the one that it was in and definitely deeper. I cover the bottom of the pot with a small piece of a coffee filter so that the soil stays inside, and every time I pick the pot up, soil doesn't come out. You really don't need much. One filter lasts actually a really long time. You just want to cover the hole. And then I'm going to start by putting soil into the bottom of the pot. I want to plant this plant at about the same height it was at in the last pot. So I'm going to check it and notice how much soil I'm going to need to put in the bottom. I'm going to carefully set my plant in, make sure it's at a height I want it to be. Once it's in and centered, then I'm going to fill around the sides with more soil. As I am filling this with soil, I'm wanting to tap it gently on the surface so the soil settles down all the way in. I don't want to leave any big air pockets. I'm also pressing down on the top of the soil. I don't want to compact the soil, but I want to be sure that it's going all the way down. This would be an ideal time to take your plant into a sink or your shower and give it a shower and clean off all of the leaves, and then that also serves to give it a nice drink. Most of the time I will water my plant right after I've repotted it. My only exception is with succulents. Those tend to like to stay dry for a few days because you don't want the base of the stem to rot. As you water it, especially that first time, the soil is going to compact even more. So you want to take note of the soil level. Make sure you don't need to add more on top. This girl looks good. So let's get to some questions. Number one question that I get quite often is, can I reuse soil? Careful viewers will notice that I absolutely did reuse soil with this plant. Now this plant has only been in this pot about 6 months, so I knew the soil was pretty fresh. I mixed the soil from the original pot in with my fresh soil so that it had a lot of nutrients mixed into it. And then I reused it. Soil materials are very expensive and we don't want to waste. If I know the source of the soil and I know it is completely free of pests, I will absolutely reuse it. If I don't know the source, if I've just brought the plant home, for instance, or the plant isn't doing well, looks sickly, or has any pest or disease, I discard the soil completely. Question number 2, should I untangle the roots? Again, as you watched my process, I did gently untangle those roots. I would have been a little bit more forceful if the roots were tightly bound. Sometimes I'll come in with scissors and cut them even to stimulate downward growth of the roots. Now, some plants, I'm extra careful with the roots. Hoya, for instance, have very delicate roots, and I am very, very careful not to disturb those too much. And a third question I get is, I just repotted my plant and now it looks terrible and it's wilting. What did I do? Probably you did nothing wrong. Some plants just respond a little more dramatically to repotting and will wilt and look sickly for a few days, up to a week. You want to be really careful not to disturb the plant too much after repotting. Keep it out of direct sunlight for sure, and maybe amp up the humidity a little bit. And if you wait up to a week, your plant will most likely bounce back. Thank you for watching my video. I do appreciate you so much. If you have any further questions on repotting, leave them down in the comments below. Again, if you liked this video, it really helps me if you tap that like button and subscribe. It tells the algorithm that this is worthwhile material. Until next time, my plant friends, let's keep growing together a greener world.